Wednesday morning, Justice. How are you doing?
Sure is. I'm okay. I am like just a little congested, I think, from being out kind of in the yard trying to get all that together. But you're right. It is a Wednesday. It's a little cloudy out. It's
you weren't wearing your mask? You know, your mask would have helped out.
Yeah, but like part of the privilege of having my own space is that like I don't have to wear a mask in here or out in my backyard.
How does that privilege?
Like,
how's that privilege feel this morning? Your head feels
terrible, and I hate it.
Yeah, exactly.
Why don't you introduce our guest this morning, Six?
We have a guest that I don't think many people are a stranger to. Or don't know about here, however you would want to put that. But it's Pat Papadeas from Rose City Politics, teacher at St. Clair College, and a lot of other amazing things that kind of go on in the area. So I'm pretty excited to be able to sit down with her. It's been I think almost 2 years. We did an article in the Drive magazine with Pat, so I was able to photograph her, and I'm sure we'll chat about that a little bit too. Before we get to all that, though, you have set us up with another video this morning.
I have. So this morning, a courtesy of the AVB back catalog,
ladies and gentlemen,
we are going to show you Crissi Cochrane and Something Like Bliss.
It was unexpected. When I met you, everything changed. I've been going through the motions till I first heard your name. Wasted no time, got right to talking. Ooh, you were so lovely. Asked you out on a date downtown, and then the whole world became something like this. Feeling like this, feeling something like this. And it's hard to resist this. You between the frames, you're like an oil painting. You with the sunlight in your hair, covering the waterfront. Your voice like music in the air. We both knew this was something special. It was something I had missed, but sure I see deep inside of me to something I didn't know was there. Something like this. Feeling like this. Feeling something like this. And it's hard to resist this. Something like this, feeling like this, feeling something like bliss, and it's hard to resist. No, I won't resist this.
We are joined by Pat Papadeas now. Good morning. How you doing?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Great. Hi.
I just want to thank out the AVB podcast and Crissi Cochrane again for the video that we just played. It's always good to revisit some stuff in the past and bring back a little bit of that happiness of when we were doing things outdoors with people in different places.
All in the same room together.
Yeah, all in the same room together. Pat, it's been a while since we've been in the same room together.
It has.
I was saying to Justice at the intro that it was a couple of years ago that I photographed you for the Drive magazine, which was a year after your march down in Washington. So, you know, it's kind of silly to say, like, hey, what have you been doing since then? Because I know how crazy busy you've been. But let's start off with something really nice and easy. You still enjoying your Turkish coffee and hanging out at home
Absolutely.
and enjoying some books during this time?
I am. Although I have, probably since we last spoke, I've transitioned a lot more to listening to podcasts than to reading. I think it's probably a sign of not only the times, but of also of age. I find that easier on the eyes now. So really enjoying what's happening with podcasts. Absolutely.
Do you have a favorite podcast that you'd like to shout out for everybody?
Oh, wow. Well, Rose City Politics. Again, I shamelessly plug.
Actually, we'll throw that up under your name. Sure.
I like to listen to, just as when I read for pleasure, I like to read fiction, science fiction. I like to get away. I read so much of the real stuff all day long. So even with podcasts, I pretty well like to do some stories, podcasts, dust, sci-fi. I do like a few true crime ones, but not because of the true crime aspect per se. Really like Case Files out of Australia, mostly because of his monotonous voice. I just like that. I don't want too much happening in my ear sometimes, especially when I'm listening to it. So I really enjoy Anonymous and the way he just really, in a monotone voice, tells you these really gruesome and disturbing things. So,
absolutely. Before we sort of go into the next question, 6, we have a good morning from Susan over from show. So good morning, Sue. Thanks for joining us.
Good to see people up and early this morning. I guess, Pat, this is probably a regular time for you. Some of our viewers, this is a little bit earlier.
This is a little early. This used to be really early for me, and things have changed in life. You know, as you progress, things change. I find during COVID, all hours are very different, and I've been getting up a lot earlier, so it's not so bad. I'm pretty well known as not a morning person, and so I think I've gotten a lot better with that. I've listened to your podcast, your show. As a result, I have to say, I also want to say, Justice, I heard the one a couple days ago when you were talking about the story of your eyeglasses, and I thought that got a short shrift. I think that's just such a cool story. Really love that story. Reminds me I need to get new glasses, but very cool. Can you tell me what record was that again?
That's Sammy Davis Jr.'s Hello Detroit.
Just the coolest eyeglass story in my opinion.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm glad I listened to that one.
Shout out to Mark.
Yeah, before I got turned into glasses, me too.
Yeah, Mark from Walkerville Optical, and I think when you were getting those, they had like maybe one other pair, because those are, I mean, obviously limited edition runs and stuff like that, but pretty wicked glasses, hey? Yeah. This is what it takes, is a group of people right now in a pandemic to sit and talk about our glasses. Mine are always scratched and always busted up because I carry so much of camera equipment in front of me, and I have literally missed stairs and like smashed my camera in my face. I've given myself black eyes with my gear. So my glasses take a beating. They're not fancy.
They look good too. I don't know what story's behind them, but they look good. My big problem with glasses is I love to cook, and after a little while, I'm like, why can't I see? Oh, that's why.
Yeah, they get coated, hey?
Yeah.
We were quickly talking about podcasts. I was actually listening to a podcast, and again, partly because of age and partly because I joke with people, like, I don't read. I read to learn in university, and I read to learn now. I read for that, information sort of thing. So I don't read for pleasure. And podcasts are kind of a bit of that, and I listen to a couple of them. And there's a photographer who talks to other photographers about their work, and he introduced me to a person. I will put the description in it this morning, but this artist has got an actor from California to do a series of videos for us called Donald at Home, and it's this guy playing Donald Trump as if he's at home doing the most mundane thing, but talking as if he's Donald Trump. And if it weren't for podcasts, I wouldn't have woke up this morning with the biggest laughter I've actually had about Donald Trump in a long time.
Oh, well, I hope, it sounds encouraging, and that could be entertaining. It could also be, highly frustrating and depressing. So it depends how it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, and part of this podcast this morning was these two people talking about politics and how, obviously you're involved in Rose City politics. And one of them was saying, when I was growing up in Britain, and he said, a white guy, I didn't really think about politics, and it becomes a sort of white privilege thing to not really think about politics, or think that you don't have to worry about those things because they don't affect you so much. How in this sort of climate of things is your world of politics? I know you're involved on a local level, but how are you feeling with what's going on, and are you picking kind of larger topics or working towards something really important here?
I guess it depends what's happening and at what time. I mean, the world is a big place, right? So, excuse me. I think sometimes in North America generally, we don't have as big of a grasp on geopolitics as perhaps other nations do. Probably because they're more directly impacted by things that may go around, or simply our education system in actually not being so we are the center of the universe sometimes. So politics is huge on when you take a look at it on a global basis, and so many issues, so little time. Sometimes I look at social media and people will say, nobody's talking about this, and you almost feel guilty that nobody has mentioned this crisis or this issue or this terrible thing that's happening. And what can you really focus on? Local, of course, has a direct impact on our lives, which is why I probably spend the most time on local, and find that it has, because it directly impacts our lives and how we live. And then, you sort of move out from there. It's really, sort of your community and the little organizations you belong to that make up that community, whether it's a neighborhood or whether it's your book club or whether it's your place of work, the social circles that we have, and then broadening from there, the region, and then the province, and then the country, and then of course what's happening to our neighbors, the Americans, simply because of that proximity that we have. And then I think it moves out after that. For those of us that come from a different cultural background, so I'm not too far off the mothership that came from somewhere else. My parents were immigrants, so that connection probably. Then I think the next thing is you sort of watch what's happening back to your relatives, and I think that's pretty well how we function. At least that's how I see it. So I guess my interest in politics sort of
radiates
expands in a circle.
Yeah. I've been catching, obviously, some of the Rose City podcasts. It's really nice to see you guys kind of like throwing it out. It's taken a bit of a different format. John's doing a pretty good job, trying to control the technology of it. Has that kind of changed the way that some stuff has been done? Has there been more conversations going on since Zoom is kind of like this, and maybe your time isn't spent, at the college or teaching or doing a lot of other things right now?
So absolutely, my time is spent teaching and at the college.
Yeah, yes.
No doubt about that. I'd love to talk about, what that transformation or that transition is like. But John has been a great addition. Sarah Morris, who's been she's got a new job. So some new additions along the way. Obviously, we've been doing it for a long time. Started on radio, moved to podcasts. And I think that was actually the bigger switch for us. And then not being able to do it live, so doing it like this, but you adjust to those environments. I think that the show has moved a little bit more toward back in the day we just would what's the topic, and we would go out there and just spew whatever we felt, and it made for really good listening radio. Now I think we do a lot more preparation, the sources, We're pretty well commenting on media stories for the most part. And also we have a lot more guests, so there's more interview style. And so, we kind of differentiate between someone we bring on as a guest and just ask questions and have a conversation, and somebody who's a guest panelist who's coming on and we just throw anything out there and they get to interact with their opinions on that topic. So sometimes it's hard to discern what that's about. It's been interesting. Last week we had I was notified that there was a new podcast up, and their first episode was a critique of Rose City politics, or a play on Rose City politics. So I'm not sure. I don't know how to take that, but I take it as a compliment when somebody wants to mock it.
Yeah, well, you've reached a certain level of fame.
And sometimes people don't know the history of it. I think we should do probably a better job of how it came together. Is people really across the political spectrum, right? Which is what makes it interesting. And sometimes, depending on who's hosting, sometimes you're getting one part of the spectrum, not the diverse. But I think it works really, really well when we've got all those perspectives coming in. And it's interesting when we, collide, and when we find things very similar, despite coming at it from a different lens.
I think that's interesting. Go ahead, Justice.
I sort of have two questions. My first question is, if you're comfortable answering on the show, Pat, where do you sort of fit in on the political spectrum? And then my follow-up question to that is, what are your goals, personally, what are your goals with Rose City politics?
So I'll answer the second one first. I never really thought of Rose City politics as, having any particular goal other than to bring more awareness to local issues and have people more engaged in what we think are important issues. And I think it's no secret, and this started a while ago, but progressively we have lost some very, very important voices in mainstream media. And there are only, the resources, for whatever reason, which I think we all know, a real struggling aspect. And that is not good for democracy. The media is a very important check on political systems. Yes. And so it provided a more local, hyper-local, in-depth look into issues, and I think it's more important than ever. I think it's important that we still, we're not media. We don't have we're not journalists to relay news. We have opinions. Yes. And I think often I see one of my issues, and I talk about this in my classes as well, a big issue in social media and generally what we're seeing is this inability to differentiate, fact from opinion. Which is a growing concern. But we're definitely opinion, but we're hoping that those opinions are formulated by facts. Of course, opinions should change when facts change. And it's something else that you can't dig in and say, well, that's what I thought and that's what I'm going to continue to think. As factors change, so should how we look at an issue. My partisan lens happens to be, there's two things: where you sort of sit philosophically in politics and whether that fits into and whether you allow it to fit into a particular political party. I've been a supporter or a member of the Liberal Party for a very, very long time. I remember when I joined the Liberal Party. I remember I joined for a particular person who I thought would have made a great representative, and I think that is one of the key ways to engage. I remember back during Occupy and the 1%, there was a great little short video. A friend did it at a London on a local TED show and basically said, you know what the 1% is? The 1% are the people who are engaged in partisan politics, because when you take a look at our system, those are the ones who are going to determine locally whose name is on the ballot. And that's 1% of the population. So by the time we allow, whether it's 50% or whatever the voter engagement is to go and vote, that decision of who is on the ballot has been made by a very small group of people. Yes. And so I think that kind of engagement is actually really important. You have people saying, oh, why did they get somebody better to run? Why didn't you get engaged? And then you would have been part of the process to determine who would run. So that's where I fit as a sort of a color. However, I have never worked for the Liberal Party. I have never been paid by the Liberal Party. I've never been a spokesperson for the Liberal Party. And like all organizations that I belong to that consider me a bit of a disturber of, I think that would be true for anybody that knows me in Liberal circles. I'll be the first to criticize Liberals, right? Because I truly believe in the grassroots of it. We've done some really great work. In fact, I was at the convention that told the party that we need to take a position on the decriminalization or legalization of marijuana. That happened as a result of a party movement and then electing a leader who would then take that position and say, yeah, that's what we're going to do in the next election. When you take a look at it, that's how it happens. And there's battles there. So that's the partisan lens. But I don't consider myself a hack in the sense that just because the Liberals said so, there I am. I mean, oh my gosh, I'm probably going to run out of time. One of the big battles I had with my Liberal friends was during the time that the Liberals wanted, and this might surprise you because of my work on women's issues and as a feminist, but I was very much against the long gun registry. And that was a very much outlier position for a Liberal that, I was being disloyal to the Liberals. And I felt very strongly that, and I think when we look back at history as a result of what happened with that file and where we're at, I think politically I was, justified from the beginning in that position. That is not to say that I'm pro everybody should be carrying, firearms.
Yeah.
What I did think was that was the solution to the issue. And frankly, it came very quickly after the Montreal Massacre. Okay. And a lot of the rhetoric that was tied to why we needed that registry was tied to because it was going to somehow help women and save women. And there was absolutely no evidence of that. And when you take a look at the millions of dollars that went into it, I personally think that there was a lot more we could have done to advance the status of women and to protect women in Canada than that particular model or that particular issue. So that was one that I battled constantly within the party. I consider myself pretty centrist, although because of my advocacy, I like to say, I suppose, a radical centrist.
Yeah. There's a few parts to this I want to chat about. Is like how do you handle and kind of just let it roll off that you are sort of known as a bit of a pot stirrer. In my case, a shit disturber. I'm a loudmouth, and I don't mind kind of being accusatory in tone, and I want some things changed. How do you deal with that?
Well, I think you just said why, because you want some things changed. Somebody said, why are you so critical? I'm only critical of things that I care about. If I don't care about them, then I'm not paying attention, and so it doesn't really matter. It matters when we talk about them, then it matters somehow. And I think that's the important thing. What do we care about, and what is it that we think needs to be improved or changed? Yeah. I work within organizations, so it's I'm sort of not out there. I'm not out there thinking that the system needs to be dismantled. I think the system needs to be changed. So we have to make some choices. Do we want to be working outside of the system and just, constantly saying, oh, it's shit and it should be changed? And we can't really accomplish anything that way. Do we have to buy into the system enough that we're little soldiers? I think that there's a happy medium that you can belong to society, belong to your neighborhood, belong to organizations, and respectfully work for change. Sometimes you have to be a little bit more forceful depending on how big the mistake you think that is being made. Yeah. And so that's sort of how I mean, obviously I work in, I have a job, and I'm an educator. I feel like I have a responsibility to students to, lead by example in some ways. I do teach law, and I teach business ethics, and I teach certain things that I think that there are proper ways to do it. Proper. I don't even like what I just said there.
But sometimes sometimes the things, those proper, the correct ways, or like you're saying, kind of that process doesn't work. Just
well,
a little bit. Yeah, go ahead.
I believe in process, right? Like, so I belong to a board. I believe in working and having a very strong and mission that is authentic, and values that you're going to believe in, and then creating the strategies for where you want your organization to be. So whether we're talking about a very small organization, a larger, more complex, systemic, embroiled with systemic issues organizations, or whether you're talking about a community or a province or a country. So we constantly have to know I need to know what hat I'm wearing, because I work on so many things. So right now we're having a conversation. It's the morning. My dad may be listening from Greece. Hi, Dad. So how we're going to speak here is maybe very different than how I'm going to speak to my grandmother, or how I'm going to speak to my child, or how I'm going to speak to my class, how I'm going to speak if I'm, speaking in the House of Commons, or how I'm going to speak when it's an after show on Rose City Politics. We're the same people, but we're speaking wearing a different hat, because now I'm speaking as either a member of that organization. I don't speak for my employer. I don't go near the hand that feeds me. I may do so internally, right? So I think we sometimes forget that there is a proper process. If I belong to an organization, I want to be part of that mission, its values, and if they have been, we've done our homework, and we're working towards the same thing, then we can disagree, but we can land on something. The best idea wins. We move forward. We're a team. We back each other up, and we continue to do where we think we're going. We're rowing in the same direction. I think where we have problems is when we don't have a clear focus as to what that is, and that leads to some other processes that have to take place. But I think you have to be, if you're part of a team, you need to play by the rules of that team, whether it's a sports team. Everybody has rules. The mafia has rules. So what are the rules that you're playing with? And there's time to change the rules. Law is the rules, right? We advocate for the changes of those, but you still have to work towards those.
Absolutely. I have sort of two questions. Six, is there anything else you want to ask before we?
No, we don't. We can continue on just a little bit longer, but go ahead and ask those questions.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so the first one then, if we've got some more time, is what do you sort of recommend for folk who might be listening now that we have more time now, sort of with things the way that they are, who want to get involved, especially on a local level, who want to help? What advice would you sort of lend to them?
So on a local level, I think we have so many local organizations, and everything is political. Everything is more or less political, because politics impacts all of our lives. I think, where one lives and directly in their community, what is it? Whether it's a park, whatever issue, everyone I think has some value or something that they're interested, and you can walk around and say, that would be a good change. Sometimes we don't know what needs changing. Sometimes we think we have the solution without actually realizing where the problem is, and not having any institutional knowledge on why something didn't work. So I think sometimes it's really important to listen, and have experience. This is why I think, in a lot of cultures where you listen to your elders, not necessarily that you're going to do the same things, but you get a lot of information. So getting involved in local politics. Who's your city councillor? Following them. Ward 7 right now has an MTC. People in Ward 7 should be looking at who's running, and how engaged do they want to be, picking a candidate perhaps that they really believe in, and supporting them, and working out why they support them, because it's a two-way street. I want to support you because I like this is what you said. Will you really carry through with that? And so it starts local. And Windsor, I don't know, are you born and raised in Windsor, Justice?
No, I grew up in Pickering, Ontario.
Okay. So, I'm going to say something that doesn't sit well sometimes with Windsorites. I've been in Windsor since 1986. So more than half my life now. I definitely consider myself Windsor proud. I chose to have my children and raise my family here. I believe in this community, which is why I work on a lot of issues, whether it's the Downtown Windsor BIA or the Film Festival and all those other things that we've talked about, because I believe there are things that can make Windsor great and is fantastic, not great again, better. And I find, and I'm going to say something that offends sometimes people, But I think Windsorites sometimes are their own worst enemy. And I find that Windsorites that were born here and moved away for a little while, or at least traveled a little extensively, I'm not talking about, a little resort trip, and came back, have so much to offer this community because they can see the beauty of Windsor from a different lens. I also think that those of us that did not originally come from Windsor but came here see it in a completely different light, see its immense potential. And, be part of the BIA, look at social media, and there's some really great things happening downtown. And then you read somebody that writes this. Downtown is a shithole. I haven't been there in 8 years. Well, how would you know, first of all, if you haven't been there in 8 years? And secondly, shut the hell up, because you're part of the problem.
Yes.
I may be known as a shit disturber, but I don't think I'm ever out there to just shit on something for no reason without trying to make it better. I think that if we're going to stir things up, there's got to be a reason behind it, and that means because we're working towards something better. Well, my biggest issue right now, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the biggest issue to me, of great importance, that I think is a mistake that may be made that is going to impact this community for generations to come. I see it as truly the most important issue in my experience being here, and that is the hospital location. I truly believe that is the most significant issue.
Well, we just went from now a half-hour show to about an hour and a half discussion.
I'm so sorry.
No. I am
used
totally.
To long shows. I'm verbose.
So. 2 things here. I grew up in Wheatley, and I played sports in Wheatley, therefore Leamington, Kingsville, and all the surrounding areas. I moved to Vancouver in 1999 before Y2K, and I came back in 2014, almost 15 years to the day. So the value of people who have gone and come back, when I got back, I wanted to talk to some people, like outside looking Windsor. I mean, looking back at what we were, looking what we could be doing. And at this point in time, Justice and I were doing stuff with the AVB. Things there shifted and it became different. Justice went away, came back, and we decided to do some stuff together. And part of this was kind of supporting the political person in my ward, who is Chris Holt, that I could back him. And like we've said before, we don't have a platform, but we had a megaphone. So we offered Chris those opportunities to put out weekly updates, or the updates before some of the council meetings, to kind of explain what was going on at council, so that people could kind of make those decisions on a Thursday or Friday if it was really important on a Monday that they were there. And we tried to do stuff within our local tiny community. And then ultimately it becomes an issue of time. So not that we weren't willing to give it, but Chris has got kind of 3 things, and he's juggling a lot. And it was just, there wasn't a lot of time to kind of get those things done. It's not that we didn't feel that they were important, and it's not that we didn't want to continue on. It's that Chris literally just had no time to be doing these sort of updates prior to. But I think even on that local level, we really tried, and it is important for people to get out there and do whatever they can. And with the technology in our hands now, like you've said earlier in this, Pat, is that we aren't necessarily journalists, but we are opinion people, and it's very easy to get your opinion out now, and it is very easy to throw some technical support to, Chris and I joke about it. He's a little bit of a Luddite. He's like, I don't get the technology, but if you guys can do this for me, then, if you can offer those things to your community, it's about your neighborhood, your ward, then your city, and wanting to do things differently. And then from going away to coming back, there were a few issues that I, again, was very loud about. I was on the mayor's blocked social media list back when that happened a couple of years ago. And trying to change those things within this community, specifically just recently seeing a rebel flag flying in somebody's backyard and me calling on Chris, Reno, talk to Fabio now. Essentially, it's like, why is there not a bylaw? And they're like, well, this isn't a municipal issue. And it's like, well, make it a municipal issue. It is time that it becomes a municipal issue. I want to change the community that I live in, and things have to change. The discussion has to happen. So ultimately, get involved in those local politics. I mean, try and follow the process, try and get in there and change those things. And when they don't work, what do you do? What do you do when that kind of process is?
I mean, the more engaged you become. Oh, welcome back, Six.
Oh, there you go.
The more you were a little frozen there for a minute. So just a little interesting thing since we started talking about Rose City politics, one facet of my life. Chris Holt, of course, was a co-host of Rose City Politics, and Reno Bordelin was a co-host of Rose City Politics, and Kieran McKenzie, a founding member of Rose City Politics, all three now on City Council. We joke about, you get elected, you're off the show. To me, what's happening locally is an indication of that kind of engagement. If you take a look at historically, and I think it's really important to take a look at where your city council has been and how it developed. I mean, under different mayors, different administrations in terms of how they led and the style that they had. And the impact that the strength and the values, I would say, because when I think about Chris Holt, agree or disagree with him, he comes with very clear values of what he believes the community should be, and I think he listens. And this is what's important. I mean, what resonates with you? That doesn't mean. Reno Bordelin, I have a fantastic story about Reno Bordelin. I met Reno Bordelin at the door. How better politically can you get? He literally knocked on my door asking for my support in his first run. And I actually was already supporting the incumbent at the time, who was a colleague of mine, who I think did a fabulous job with integrity in all the years that he was on city council, and a voice of reason, and that was Fulvio Valentinas. And I said to him, I work with Fulvio, he's a great guy, but I found him intriguing, and I found his forthrightness. I really liked it. So that I had to say, being somebody who's politically engaged, I said, I'm going to watch that one. Of course, Fulvio went on to win that last election, decided not to run. And that's when, at that point, hello, Reno Bordelin. You knocked on my door. I really like what you had to say. Where are you? And then he went on. So I can, and I supported him in his campaign. And of course, he was on the show. But here's the thing. There are, ask Reno, at least 3 times a week, I'm going to call him and yell at him about something because I care, and he knows it. He can take it. I really like that about him. He can really hear an argument. He can bring facts to the discussion that you may not know to give you some perspective, but he'll also listen to it. I think that it's one of the concerns that I have in our upper leadership that doesn't have that. Thin skin is not a place to be in politics. This is not to say that you should be taking abuse, but I think that if you're not prepared to listen, if you're going to be blocking people from your social media account because you don't like that they have something to say, that's actually the problem. And so I think that we're in a better place. I think that we have some really strong city councilors as a result. Again, that doesn't mean you're going to agree with what they say all the time. But who can you possibly agree with 100% of the time? I don't know. I don't agree with myself 100% of the time. So I think that I think we're moving in the right direction. And that brings me some hope, to be honest with you.
Well, that's great. We are kind of getting actually to a point in our interview where we're going to ask you a question. I'm just looking at our feed, so we may be having some technical live stream difficulties at this moment, but everything is being recorded, so that's a good thing about technology. So Pat, on a daily basis, we try and ask our guests what they've been doing to keep positive, to maybe keep mentally healthy themselves. Is there any little thing you're doing on a semi or a regular basis to keep yourself moving in a more positive direction?
I honestly have to say that the minute that we were told we were locking down, and I have to say this with the understanding that I hope everybody stays safe. I hope everybody stays healthy. My daughter is a nurse. She was on a COVID floor. So all those things, all that aside, I absolutely loved the change. I cannot lie. I was like giddy, especially for the first little while. And even now, I absolutely love the opportunities that new ways to do things have allowed us to do things. I was tired of the running around and the meetings and the events. And I love that we can just get our stuff done in a whole other way that we always knew we could. I think that we need to look at what that looks like. Probably have no time to talk about it from an education perspective. I think the post-secondary institutions are moving at a pace where at least there's some adaptability. And it was too soon. It was too sudden when we were on lockdown in moving from traditional to remote. But there's absolutely no reason why, not in all cases, but many things cannot be taught in a new environment. And it was, it gave us the kick in the butt that we needed and should have been a long time coming. I think that the elementary schools and secondary schools have not done a good job. In fact, of all our public portfolios and files, that is the one that I think there's been failure there. And that's probably another longer conversation. But I'm not blaming the teachers. I would go so far as to suggest that teacher unions, however, have a huge responsibility in the failure to come to, and I'm a proud union member, but being a member and the institution of the union is a very different thing. And I think we are not where we need to be for the children that need to be returning, or whatever that's going to look like returning to school. And coupled with that, I think childcare is the single most important issue that we need to be addressing as a result of this crisis, to understand that without childcare, we cannot have a well-rounded functioning economy with full participation of all its members, particularly women. So those are some of the issues that I think arise from that. It's not answering your question, like, is this what I do out of my spare time? I love to cook.
Yes.
I love to cook. And so I'm really happy about the fact that, cooking, depending on what it is that you're doing, is not, you come home from work and you've got 45 minutes to feed. Cooking is an art, and you might eat all day, even if it's 5 minutes at a time. The ability to be at home and to cook and to plan that, I love. I'm finding a lot of joy in my garden. And so those are, again, the things that are right here that I think are fabulous. And so I have no complaints about the transition that it has had on my life, but I'm at a different phase in my life. I have to say that, I remember very well having younger children, and I don't know that I would have been able to do what I did in these last few months, and whether it's for organizations and planning and or my own job. If I had to, at the same time, explain to, children that I'm actually at work right now. Yeah. Children don't understand that. Yeah. You're in front of a computer. I need attention. It's challenging enough to have a dog who needs to go every time the record button starts. It's like an alarm bell. So I think that we need to take a look at how we're going to be moving forward. And I think that there's some real opportunities in looking at our work and what work means and how we can deliver it in a much healthier way and allow more inclusive participation. There's a lot of good work that could be done from home that's going to require childcare, or if not from home, from just down the street, from a shared space that's quiet with a good, strong internet connection and technology. I think that we really need to look at some new ways of approaching it. So I didn't really answer your question. I went to all. This is how my mind works.
What you've answered is like literally when we need a great guest to talk about some great topics, we just call up Pat. Like honestly,
Having on reserve.
Yeah. Speed dial. If anybody actually has that anymore.
Make the show, you're on and fine. Actually, that reminds me, if I may, I know you want to come to an end, but I'm going to do something because the anniversary of our loss with Mark Boscarroll is coming up, July 24th. I'm wearing the Mark Boscarroll. Well, absolutely, but it's the Mark Boscarroll 48-hour Flick Fest bracelet that we named, who was the founder of WIF, of course, and all of that. So many great ideas. Yeah. Huge loss, right? Huge loss in our community. Not any time goes by when we're working on some things, especially anything that has to do with the revitalization of downtown, that the spirit of Mark doesn't enter your mind. in one way or another. But I'll end with this, since you mentioned it. The way Mark Boscariel became a co-host of Rose City Politics, and I said this story actually at his eulogy, and that is, we had a guest that couldn't make it, and I think it was Paul Sinnott, who said, let me call Mark. We can always talk about a downtown issue. And called Mark, and he said, when's the show? And it's like, yes, I can be there in 10 minutes. And this was back when we were on CJAM. And he never left, and that was it. And that was the beauty of Mark. No matter what was happening and how many things he was juggling, if you needed him, he was there in 10 minutes. And so it just reminded me of Mark. That's how he ended up. Somebody did show up, and Mark came in, and the rest was history. Never left.
Yeah. We came back into the city, like I say, around 2015, and there was obviously a huge presence of Mark and the things that he was doing downtown. And my wife, being from Vancouver, was like, "Oh my God, there is so much going on here." So there is a definite loss within the community, and I know that we feel it. We've talked about it a few times, and I've talked about it with friends. So yeah, very missed. I wish I would have gotten to know him a little bit more and worked with him a little bit more, but time isn't on your side all the time. So
we just have to be like Mark and make sure that a lot of those good ideas and that spirit, right, remains.
Yep.
That's what's important.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.
For spending time. Yes, and the closer we get to school, maybe we'll have you on for another one to talk about the way that the education system is changing, because we're very interested in where that's going to go. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. It's great to see you again.
Have a great day.
You too.
Well.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Justice. Bye. Bye.